Hey everybody, I'm really excited today because I got some plants in the mail yesterday. And a company contacted me a couple months ago called Forest Nursery. They're out of Arkansas. They produce a lot of food-related trees and shrubs, some native plants, and they just have a huge variety of things on their website. I encourage you to go take a look at that. But they did offer me $250 worth of plants to go and check out and order whatever I chose to order. So I'm going to start this video off by showing you what I picked, and then we're going to move on with later in the video of where I'm going to plant them, and we'll talk a little bit about each one of these as we go. So let's get started, and let's take them out of the box so I can show you how they ship them. So you can see right here we got a pretty tall box. Everything came in one box. It was kept in very good condition through the mail, and everything's all stapled up in the box. So let's take a look and see how to get into this box most efficiently. Alright, so first thing I'm noticing here on the outside, they've got live with plants, handle with care, keep above 32 degrees. So you don't want your plants to freeze once they arrive at your location. And so basically what I have here are two separate groupings of plants. It looks like they've got a bamboo pole that they're using in the center to kind of keep everything nice and together. It's all tied to that. And if you check that out, we've got some nice looking plants. They're Bareroot, which Bareroot basically means that there is no soil and stuff attached to the underside of it. That saves money on shipping and also reduces pathogens that could be there in the soil. I know here in the south we also have to be careful about fire ants. So I don't know if they have that issue over there, but we do here in Tennessee. But it's okay if you're importing stuff into that. That won't hurt anything. But the plants look really good. They're tied off on these little flexible type of little ties on them. I can already see some flowers starting, which is probably from one of the peach trees. So I'm going to read the instructions, check it out, and make sure I am following their directions precisely in order to get these to be successful in my garden. So when you receive live plants like this that are Bareroot, they recommend that you rehydrate them in water for 1 to 6 hours. So you basically just take a bucket full of water, put them in, let them soak for a little while. Don't exceed 12 hours so you can avoid root rot. Root rot is not a very good thing to have, so we want to avoid that. They do also recommend that if there's any damaged roots on here, to trim them off with clean shears. And they recommend to plant them as quickly as you can within 48 hours of receiving them. So I'm going to do the best I can. The first thing I can do is go ahead and get them into a container of some kind with some water so that they can begin to rehydrate. So I'm going to go ahead and get that set up. So I just went and I filled up this pot right here. I don't have the drainage holes out of this, so it is basically like a bucket of water right now. It's a newer pot that we got last year that we have not actually used for anything yet. So I'm going to go ahead and open these up and tell you a little bit about the plants that I picked, why I picked them, and we'll just comment on how these are put together. At the top, they've used some tape here, so I need to cut that off a little bit. But they've got them wrapped in plastic to keep the moisture content high while they're shipping. You never know exactly how long they're going to be in transit these days. Alright, so just go off the wrap. This really is like Christmas for gardeners. We've got sawdust around it to help keep that moisture and give them something to grow in. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and separate out these little ties off of here and get them off of the pole. Okay, so here are the trees from this little package. And these are not spindly little trees by any means. They look like they've got a pretty good caliber around them. See that right there? They are definitely not just little twigs that you get at some other nurseries. Pretty pleased with how they look so far. Now, the root system's there on that one. That is pretty good. That is really nice. Here, let me separate those a little bit better. Like that. And then right here like this one. Look at those. Now this, let me go through and tell you a little bit about what these ones are here. This is a Celeste fig. It's a fig tree, of course. and they grow very well in the area here. Sometimes they have a rough winter and then they'll die back top, but they usually come back just fine. Chicago Hardy Fig is another one. They were sold out of that when I put in my order, so I wasn't able to get that one. But the Celeste is one that I've grown before. I just didn't have a sunny enough location to really grow it effectively. It got a lot of shade. Here is an Alberta peach tree. It does have a little damage here from this little piece, but I'll prune that out. It won't be a big deal. Everything else on this peach tree looks really good. It's nice and straight, good thickness to it, very undamaged. I mean, there's not much to it other than that one little twig, which when you have shipping like this, you expect to get a little bit of damage. It already has some flowers budding out on it. I don't really expect to get any kind of fruit this year, probably not even next year. It's probably about 3 years after planting until you actually can start to expect some things. These I'm really excited about here. This is, let's see, which one are we? The American Plum and the Chickasaw Plum. These are two American native fruit trees that I wanted to put into the yard. We have some pawpaws around here, and one thing I was wanting to do on this property was to just start incorporating more native plants that produce food. I just thought that would be such a really cool thing. Now this one does have a little bit more damage on the ends. That is not a big deal at all. There's just little pieces. You would expect that. That's going to happen in shipping just normally. It's going to be really hard to not have that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this next group of trees so I can show you what else I got. And keep in mind, I just spent about $250 on this. I did go slightly over, like about $15 or so, because it didn't quite work out exactly even to that amount. Okay, so let's take a look at these. Right here, this is a grapevine, and look at that, lots of great roots. This is the Champanelle grape, which I believe can be used for making juice and wine and different things like that. And there was another grape that I ordered, a little smaller than that one. This is the Cannabis grape, which I think is more of a seedless table grape style grape. So we'll try to get some of those growing this year. Grapes are fun to propagate too, so that should be cool. Now what you'll notice on this one here, this is, where's our label there? The Stayman Winesap apple. And right down here you'll see there's a grafting point. So these are all grafted onto a different rootstock. And that rootstock can do a lot of things. It can give the plant better growing characteristics, typically disease resistance. And one big problem we have in Tennessee is cedar apple rust. That is my biggest concern with an apple tree. And the Stayman Winesap apple actually is highly resistant to that. What I found really informative on the website that these guys have, the Forest Nursery website, is that they have got an apple chart, they have apple details, they tell you everything about these plants. You can see what rootstock they use, you can see what cross-pollinators go well with other apples that you might have, or just if you're trying to order, which ones you need to order. And what's interesting about the Stayman Winesap apple is that it is a triploid chromosome plant. So basically you've got 3 sets of chromosomes in there, and the pollen is going to be sterile. So you will actually have to have another plant to pollinate this one, and then if you want that other one to get pollinated, you have to have something that will pollinate it. So you've got to be careful in choosing. So if you do one of these, you're probably going to want 3 apple trees total or more. You could always go more. And also with apple trees, you want to be sure that the bloom times will sync up, that they'll coordinate, because if one's blooming and the other is not, there's no way the pollen's going to transfer. So just some things about apples. We'll talk more about apples a little bit later, but those roots look really good. No problems with them. A little bit of a breakage there, but that's not a big deal. But they look really nice. And they're a pretty good sized tree too. You look at this, this is a good 4-foot tree. And this is actually a Kiefer pear. I had one of these on our previous property, so I wanted to get another one to put here, but it grew really tall. We never actually got pears off of it, mostly because there's too much shade, but we've got a lot more sun where we are today. And these roots are pretty solid. Check that out. You can tell where they pruned it back just a little bit, probably for shipping reasons. But it looks like a very nice looking healthy tree. And again, it is grafted. When you plant these, you're going to want to make sure that that graft stays above the soil, because if the graft goes under the ground, it's very likely that you'll end up with shoots coming from the graft plant rather than the one that you want. And the other reason the grafting is a good thing sometimes is in limiting the size of the plant that you want to grow. Sometimes you may not want a full-grown apple tree. Maybe you want something that's a dwarf that only gets about 15 feet tall as opposed to maybe 25 or 30. So there are a lot of good reasons to go with a grafted tree. So today's day 2 of this video. Didn't have time to finish up getting everything planted yesterday, but I'm going to go ahead and get these in today. And it's, as you can tell, it's a little bit overcast. We're about to get some rains in, and that's always a really great time to plant your plants because they get a nice, good, fresh watering from whatever rain is coming down. So we're going to start here with the Kiefer pear tree, and I'm putting it out here in our backyard area. Here's the top of the graft, and you can see the root system down below that. But I've carved out a little spot into the brush right here where we're going to keep that down and mowed around the tree area. And we let a lot of our area over here kind of go natural. So we carve pathways in it to get around in different places. And this is going to be one of those spots where it's a little bit off the side of a pathway, and we're going to be able to mow just right around it and kind of keep everything nice and neat, and then have some natural areas over to the side. So let's go ahead and get started on planting. So when planting this, I'm just going to start off by creating the size hole that I want by carving a little notch into the top of the grass here. Move my little tree. And we'll just go all the way around the hole. And then what we're going to do is just remove the sod that we've cleared out here. If it's rained recently, it goes really easy. So that's always a good thing. So we're just going to get down underneath it and try to just remove the sod real easily like that. Now when I plant trees, I don't like to remove the dirt and mix it with other things. I like to use the native dirt by itself. And the reason for that is, if you imagine that this hole is like a bowl, and you start adding in compost and fertilizers and stuff to that hole, the tree is not going to want to extend its roots outside of that hole. The better solution is to go outside the tree hole itself, fertilize this area each year, and as the tree gets larger and larger, its roots will extend outward into the rest of the soil to gather that nutrition. But this dirt's actually pretty good. I'm pleased that I'm not hitting rock. Here in Tennessee, you hit rock like all the time. So I'm just going to completely dig out the hole to the depth I need, which on this tree looks like it'll probably be about 8 inches or so deep for this hole. I'm starting to hit some clay. So I got a couple inches of topsoil and we got clay. But I'm not seeing rock, which is really good. Rock is all over the state. And it can make digging very annoying sometimes. Now I'm going to test fit to see how much deeper I need to go. And I think I may need to make it a little wider to accommodate these roots here on the side. I'll probably cut out a little bit more on this side, maybe make the hole a little more like an oval this time. Now the sides of the hole, what I like to do is I'll take the edge of the shovel and I'll just scuff it up. Stick it, and I think that will loosen up the edges enough that the roots can start to get a little bit of a grip. With clay soil, a lot of times it turns into like a pot, and you don't really want to have a plant stuck in a pot. You want its roots to extend well beyond the hole. And this will be a pretty big tree. Nice fruiting pear tree. Kiefer pear is actually a hybrid tree between some Asian pears, an Asian pear, and a European style pear variety. So I'm going to need to go a little deeper because I want to get down about here-ish so it's under the ground. So I've got to go down probably another, probably 4 to 6 inches or so. That is just about where I want it to be. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of this dirt back in the hole. And I'm going to mound it up a little in the middle so I have a little bit of a platform to put the tree on. Just like this. Make sure that the tree is nice and straight. That the roots are all going to stay under the soil. Pull a little bit of this out. There we go. All right, I'm going to start filling the hole. I'll just throw this in until I can get enough stability on the tree itself. So it'll stand upright. And then kind of pack it in. When you water, it will help compact the soil around the roots. So make sure that you're giving it a very good, thorough watering. It probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to water as you go. Get a little bit of soil in, put some water in, and then put a little more in. Okay, so now I've got it standing upright. I'll just start using my shovel from this point. And using the native soil, once again, I'm going to avoid the sod that I pulled out. And what I'll do is I'll turn it upside down and put it around the lower half of the hole to work sort of as a little bit of a catchment system for the water that rolls down the hill. Because we are on a bit of a slight slope here. Avoid putting these roots back in. Who knows what kind of plant that was. We've got a lot of invasive Johnson grass here and quite a few different types of weeds in the area. So I see little sprouts coming off of these cuts. Looks like the original grafting pear tree down here at the bottom was starting to sprout out. So we'll need to make sure we keep that clear because we want the graft portion, which starts right there, to be the part that we actually grow. We don't want to grow the rootstock. All right, so there's some sod. We'll move it over there. Got a little worm. Let's get him back in the soil. Now, should you stake your trees? My thought is that you shouldn't if you can get away with it. Now, a tree like this here, you can see it's pretty sturdy. It's standing upright on its own. We've got some good soil compaction down here at the bottom, and it's holding the tree up really well. If it was a larger bald and burlap type tree that was having trouble staying up, that the wind kept knocking it down, or there's just so much moisture in the ground that everything was all loose, then I'd recommend going ahead and staking it until you can get away with removing the stakes off. Because what you want is a tree to stand on its own. You want it swaying in the wind to build natural strength through the trunk and through the root system. If you take and put stakes and stuff around it, you're going to kind of give it a crutch to lean on for a while, and it won't develop that strength as quickly. Now be sure, of course, to give the trees plenty of water. Here I'm fortunate, I'm kind of at the end of my hose length here, that I can get a nice big drink here for the tree. Now kind of water from the top side and let it kind of trickle down into the hole. Now once I've got the tree all watered and everything, I do that before I mulch. And so mulching is what's going to come next. You can see there's a little bit of standing water on top of here. You can see how our soil does not necessarily absorb it as quickly as we'd like it to. So we definitely need to add organic matter to the top surface so that we can eventually create the ideal soil here. And for that, we're using wood chips. And we've got these wood chips that in the fall were delivered to us. And they've pretty much sat in a large pile, decomposing since, I think November. Maybe it was earlier than that, maybe October. But they've been there long enough that we can easily use these with no problems. I'm not worried about them even still with wood chips. They'll only take from the very surface when they're pulling out that nitrogen. But at this point, they really shouldn't be doing much of anything. Now, when mulching around the tree, we don't want to get real close up to the trunk. We want to kind of leave a little bit of a gap here. That's for a couple things. Little rodents in the area will come up and potentially gnaw on the base here. And by leaving that exposed, those creatures are going to not feel as comfortable doing that. It's not to say it's impossible for them to do it. They very well could. But we're going to protect that a little bit by keeping an open space where predators can actually see them. We're also going to keep the mulch not real high around the edge. I'm actually kind of fanning this out a little bit. I'd rather have it flatter on the outside. I don't want to create a system that's going to pool water here in the middle and create a bucket that's just going to collect it and put it down here. I'd rather the tree stretch out its roots over this area to get that water from the exterior so that the roots are making a better and stronger tree. The other thing mulch does over time, it breaks down and will go into the soil as organic matter, so that should improve things. So you always want to just keep mulching outward to the outer edge of this. Keep it so that the weeds are down around the root system. You don't want to have weed interference that's taking up nutrients that the tree needs. Now, next up today for planting are my two native plum trees. There's a Chickasaw plum right here, and then the American plum. There's a couple little differences with these. The American plum tends to sucker and form colonies more so than what the Chickasaw plum is. The reason I picked these two is because they are cross-pollinators and they're both native plants to the United States. And if you look behind me, we've got a colossal, just a ton of privet over here on this property. And my goal is to gradually cull that privet out as much as I can and replace with more native alternatives. And to some extent, I think privet actually depletes the environment of really good plants like these that produce a good fruit for us and for the wildlife in the area. So I definitely recommend, when you can, replacing the invasive plants out with better native plants that do double duty. This is a native plant, plus it is a food producer. So you get the best of both worlds. I'm not going to go through and do the whole process like I did with the pear, but I'll show you the product once I've got the holes dug and everything all planted and ready to go. Now, this is one of the plum trees, and I didn't go through and do everything, but I wanted to show you because this worked out really well. I was able to pack it down so there's a little bit of a slope coming away into the outer edge of the hole, and then right up here center is where this is. So what should happen is that the water should pool around the plant, around the outer edge of where the roots are, and help encourage those roots to grow outward. Again, we are wanting to encourage the strongest possible root systems, and so we give the plant the best advantages it possibly can. Next up, I'm going to take the mulch and we'll fill that in just like we did on the pear tree. So I've got the two plum trees planted, and I want to kind of give you a game plan, or at least an overview of this little area that we've got. You can see here we've got a central circle around this plant here, which is a witch hazel, another great native plant to have for pollinators. But when you go a little bit past that, you'll come to where the pear tree, not the pears, the plums are. So we got the Chickasaw on the right, and then the American on the left, and you'll see that the pathway just completely intersects them. And the pathway goes straight back over to here, and once we get it more cleared out, it'll look a little better with all this privet gone. But to the back, as this pathway goes down, is where our pawpaw trees are off in the woods. They were just here when we got the property. So we kind of have a little bit of a native fruit area here. Now granted, the Kiefer pear is not a native, and you can see it is right here in this location. It might be hard to see with it right now with no foliage on it. But we've also got some of these non-native calorie pears that have grown up in the back. And I'm halfway wondering, as some people have suggested, if we could attempt to graft onto them from the Kiefer pear and maybe get some fruit off of those. One other note is the Kiefer pear is a self-pollinating variety, so you don't actually have to have a second pear for pollination. So that is a really good perk for it, and we should be able to get some nice fruit off of it in a few years. Okay, well, excuse the mess that I've got here. That stuff's all going to get cleared out here shortly. But there's a green stake right here, and that stake is where I'm going to be planting a peach tree. Now, I was very careful. I marked it off so I wasn't close to those power lines. You have to be at least 20 feet off from these power lines, so we're definitely that. Also, over here where this little set of junk is is going to be a greenhouse area, and it's going to come out about 12 feet this direction and then about 16 back. It'll be right next to the vegetable garden. So I wanted it to be on the side that did not have any kind of impediment from the sun. You know, I don't want the greenhouse to block the light from the peach tree over here. And as you can see, I've got a lot of wood chips put out. If you're looking for an update on the vegetable garden, I'll probably get to that here before too long. But let's get on with the peach tree, and we'll go ahead and get it planted. This is an Alberta peach, which should grow pretty well. It's a popular variety. And what's really kind of neat is it actually came with some flowers on it. We probably don't want it to try to produce fruit this year. Probably need to give it a good growing season or two before it actually will give us anything great. Now I brought the camera over here so you could see the hole I'm digging. And if you compare it to the hole that I had the pear going into, all you can see right here is clay. We are on more of a slope in this spot, and so a lot of the topsoil is more eroded and has gone downhill away from this area. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. We'll probably have to do some sort of soil amendments on the exterior drip line area of the tree. If you don't know what that is, that's the area where the water would drip off the leaves if it had foliage and everything. And that outside edge is your drip line. That's typically where you want to do your fertilizers and things. But anyway, we got a lot of clay here, and I'm just hoping that I don't run into rock. Well, and if you're hearing that sound, that means we've hit some rock. Let's see what we've got. Maybe I can break it up. Maybe it's small enough it'll come right out. Ah, good. All right, so basically we were able to just easily remove that piece of rock right there. Tennessee is such that you can go for a long distance and not hit any rock, or you can end up with a huge slab of rock running into the surface. Probably I'm pretty lucky here that it was just a small little rock. Now I'm over here in the vegetable garden, and I'm going to do the grapes next. There will be a fence area right up here that I'm going to plan to have a trellis on for the grapes to grow up. So I'm going to plant one here and one a little further over here to my left, and we'll have them growing up on that trellis. They get sunshine from that direction over there most of the day. You can't really tell that too well because of the overcast skies we've got right now. But this should be an excellent location for them. They can grow up above everything else. I've got a little thornless blackberry down here. It will stay shorter and be able to grow down below that, so they shouldn't interfere with one another in their growing. All right, so I've got the 2 grapevines planted. I still need to come back and water and mulch on those, but I wanted to show you this other thing over here. We're getting there. Over here on this side is the fig tree that I just planted. Same deal with it. It needs some water and mulch, and it will be good to go. And you can see I've got this little pink string line to keep my fence line even until I can get to that. But we ran into a problem with the apple trees, or at least the apple tree hole. Now we're getting a Stayman Winesap apple planted, but here's what I ran into. In this hole right here, this is where I wanted to plant it. There's a big old huge rock about 6 inches underneath the surface of the ground. And that's just what you get here in Tennessee. And it's a big one. I tried to feel around it, see if I could pry it up and see if it was a little one. There was no way that was going to work. Now over here, on this one, I ended up cutting accidentally through a persimmon tree root. And we have a really large persimmon tree right here. It does produce fruit. So we don't want those roots to necessarily interfere with the apple trees. I was trying to just move a few feet away from the rock hole, which is the one on the right, and move over to the one here on the left. But we got roots. So the big problem is not that I couldn't have planted them there together and they could intertwine their roots, but it's going to be more of the nutrition in the soil. The persimmon is going to dominate most of that. So I need to find a different spot. So I moved about, 10 feet over, maybe 8 feet or so. And we actually have a decent looking hole started right there. So I'm hoping I can get that apple put in here. It's not exactly where I wanted it to go. So we're going to do it on the edge of that bed and that bed, parallel with the other apple tree, which is right here. So let me get to this hole. I'm going to dig it out a little bit more, and then we will get the apple tree in. All right, so this is the Stayman Winesap apple I'm about to put in the ground. I'll talk a little bit more on apple trees and why I picked what I picked, but this one is a resistant variety to the cedar apple rust. And cedar apple rust goes between the cedar trees and the apple trees for its life cycle, and it can be very damaging to the apple trees. So we got to be careful and get resistant varieties whenever possible. All right, so we got the apple tree in a decent hole after doing twice or three times the amount of work for it. But sometimes that's how it goes. You never know in Tennessee when you run into rock or roots or whatever. Sometimes you got to readjust your plans. So overall, I am extremely happy with how these trees are. They're all good looking trees with good root systems. You don't see a whole lot of damage. You got a couple things here I may need to prune off that just happens in shipping. But they did a really good job at shipping. They did a really good job at getting these out to me in good condition. They're all alive. And they're not spindly little sticks either. Some nurseries, they'll send you stuff and it's just a tiny little thing like this. And here we've got a good 4-foot size peach tree, and the apple tree is about the same. The plum trees were a little smaller, but they're more of a shrub plant anyway. They could grow like 15 feet or so tall. So really pleased with everything overall. And this is Food Forest Nursery. They have a website at foodforestnursery.com. I am looking forward to seeing how these grow. I'll try to do another review post on them later on in the year to just kind of see what makes it and what doesn't. I'm thinking that all of it is going to do really well because they're in such great condition. But I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Appreciate you watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.